Hello all. I will probably just start giving an introductory comments as the rest of my panel are getting their microphones on. So it's a pleasure to be here today and to welcome you to this session, Driving the Fintech Revolution with AI. You know, over the past decade, Fintech has transformed how Africans save, pay, borrow, and invest. From the rise of mobile money to the growth of digital banks, blockchain platforms, and embedded finance, Africa has proven that innovation can flourish where traditional infrastructure has lagged. Now we're entering a new phase where artificial intelligence is redefining what is possible. AI is already being used to expand credit access to the underserved, to detect and prevent fraud, and deliver hyper-personalized financial experiences. In short, it's accelerating the pace of financial inclusion and reshaping how institutions from startups to banks understand and serve their customers. We're witnessing something extraordinary, a new era of financial innovation. Oh, sorry, am I already saying that? AI is helping these fintechs operate faster, smarter, and more sustainably. But beyond the technology itself lies something more profound, the opportunity to reshape finance that is uniquely African, inclusive, data-driven, and responsive to the reality on the continent. Adoption of financial services is growing faster across Africa than anywhere else in the world. In Kenya alone, I was at the UNGA 2 weeks ago, where Strive Masiwa was talking about the data centers and the AI networks that they're building across Africa through cassava. And he threw out a statistic. I was like, that cannot be. I researched it. It is. 42% of Kenyan adults use ChatGPT on a monthly basis. They are the #1 users in the world of ChatGPT, accounting for over 5% of ChatGPT's daily traffic. So, you know, it's that level of digital curiosity and engagement tells us something powerful about the readiness, creativity, and possibility of AI across the continent. So today, we'll explore how AI is driving this revolution. Not just a tool for efficiency, but a platform for innovation and inclusion. We'll discuss how fintech leaders, investors, and policymakers can harness AI responsibly to expand access to credit, strengthen consumer protection, and unlock the next generation of growth. So I invite you all to lean in, engage, and reflect how we can connectively and collectively drive fintech innovation that's intelligent, inclusive, and authentically African. So I'm Carissa Graf Suleiman, the general partner and co-founder of the Continent Venture Partners. We're a growth stage venture capital fund investing in tech-driven startups across the continent. I am thrilled to be joined by this distinguished group of panelists. We have Babacar Seck in the middle from Askia Investment Partners. I'm not going in order. Pierre-Alain Masson, CEO of SeedStars, and Mike Mopey, managing partner of Enza Capital. They each bring a unique perspective on investment, technology, and regulation. So let's dive in. I'll begin by asking each of you how they see AI reshaping fintech across Africa, and specifically, Pierre-Alain, what do you find that's most excitement about the opportunity ahead?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah? Perfect.
Maybe just briefly introduce yourself. More detail than what I gave.
Sure. So Seedstars, we have two activities. One is investments. So we manage approximately 200 million across debt and equity, investing in early stage companies and SMEs in emerging markets, so not only in Africa. And the second activity is capacity building. So we support entrepreneurs through different type of programs, usually financed by DFIs, foundations, and corporates. And what's exciting is that we embraced, started 2 years ago, AI. For us, it was a game changer because one of the challenges we had is that we are supporting thousands of entrepreneurs every year. And it was very difficult to, I would say, keep the quality at scale. And that's what AI allowed us to do. So now what we're doing is we've developed basically a whole, we call that an operating system for entrepreneurship support. So we help entrepreneurs basically and make them recommendation with the tools that we've built. There's basically a WhatsApp AI bot that a micro entrepreneur can just start chatting with and getting recommendations on their business through AI. There is also a web app for more advanced and sophisticated companies. But what's interesting, and now how it's linked with fintech, is that we collect all of these data, and that allows us to basically do some credit assessments and investment assessment in general, so that we can start financing these companies. So for us, it's really a game changer. We can better support the companies, and by doing that, we're able to collect better and more data about these companies, which allows us to finance them basically and hopefully decrease possible NPL, or even just give the opportunity to some entrepreneurs that didn't have access to financing before would now have access to financing. So that's what's very exciting for us.
Excellent. Babacar, let's just keep in line and tell us what you're finding most exciting.
Yes, yes, of course. So I'm the managing partner at AFSIC. We're a venture capital fund focused on tech and AI startups from the continent that specifically drive productivity and increasing the output on the continent. What's really, really exciting about this AI space on the continent is that we have some specific competitive advantages, one of which, Carissa, you just mentioned. Generally, when people think about AI in Africa, the answer I get usually is, yeah, you know, there's not going to be AI in Africa. And the reality is, first, Africa has the world's fastest growing and soon the biggest digital native working age population, which shows in the usage of ChatGPT, like you mentioned, but it also shows in the adoption curves of digital services. If you look at a solution like Wave, which is a fintech from Senegal, and there are many other examples, this company was able to have 70% of the country's adult population on its payments rails within less than 5 years. So effectively in Africa, we have this digital awareness, digital savviness in the population, but also those people are also the people working in the companies. And that's a huge opportunity to actually have a workforce that's not only digital native, but soon AI native in terms of how they operate and how they use the tools. So I think that's one advantage we have. One other advantage that we have is that AI is actually changing the paradigm. In a continent where we have official languages that are most of the time different from the language people speak at home, there is a massive gap in accessibility to services, in particular financial services, but not only, because literacy is not always that high in most countries. I give an example to illustrate this really. I was speaking to an AI startup from South Africa, and South Africa is the most industrialized country on the continent. And they were telling me that in South Africa, English is not the language spoken at home in 80% of households. So there's actually a big barrier to accessing services and solutions, and a complexity on the side of the businesses that are dealing with those customer relationships when they have to do so in so many languages. With AI, you can actually enable now people to access digital services or services in general in their own language. So I think this is the first big opportunity, which is effectively putting the complexity in the background so that people can focus just on the services. So this will drive, of course, accessibility. This will drive also affordability, because AI, when we say AI, what is really AI? It's automation to the power X. It's just automation on steroids, backed by data and compute. So effectively, if you're putting all that complexity, those workflows in the background, you're able to provide a much simpler solution that addresses and just focuses on people's needs. So I think that's what AI can do for financial services. The second area where I see a big opportunity is in everything that's related to fraud, KYC, anti-money laundering. I mean, this is an area that's notoriously complex and that has driven a lot of inefficiencies on the continent. I'll give 2 examples. In the insurance space, so I have a background in insurance. It's not the sexiest, according to most people, but I disagree. In health insurance in Africa, most insurers are actually losing money. Why? Because of fraud. And at the same time, health insurance is not affordable. Why? Because of fraud, and because as a result of fraud, insurers have to increase the price to cover for those losses. Yet they still sell this insurance because it's good to acquire customers. With AI, you can actually cut that fraud significantly and increase the quality of the service by giving automated claim settlement. And some companies are doing this today. Another area is fraud detection in the financial sector. Very interestingly, so there's one thing we do, which is we engage a lot with the research community. And I was speaking to these researchers that did a test on a new kind of learning model, which is called federated learning. So essentially, it's a model that enables you to analyze different data sets without grouping them together. I'll put it simply. It's as if you could evaluate all the customer transactions of a network of banks without actually pooling the data. So you respect all the data protection rules like GDPR, for instance. They managed to get accuracy on fraud detection as high as if they had pooled the data. You could not do that with traditional models. You can do it with AI. So I'll stop there, but I think it's a huge opportunity.
Excellent. So Mike, what are you excited about in the AI space?
Excited about everything they mentioned, and so my name's Mike Montby. I'm one of the co-founders and managing partner at Enza Capital. We're a multi-stage venture capital firm backing founders and teams using technology to solve large and meaningful problems across the African continent. It looks like everyone is about to fall asleep, so but I'm glad that you're all here. Who uses AI?
Everyone.
Okay. Who used AI 5 years ago? So I think you, sir, are probably one of the only few people who's not lying, because we've all been using AI for a long period of time, but it's been linear. Booking an appointment at a restaurant online, that's a form of artificial intelligence, tapping into a database, looking at what's there, and then surfacing kind of an option. But it's been very kind of simple, very linear. And now what has happened is there's been this evolution in AI that has made it easier for the general consumer, the general public, to tap into quite a sophisticated system just by speaking. So the interface is like when Alexa launched. You could say, hey, play this song. It was a bit of a breakthrough, but it's really changing that user interface. And I think the kind of productization that ChatGPT has brought to the market, and Kenyans in June is when they use the highest amount of kind of ChatGPT. I don't think it's kind of every month. It was in June.
Exams.
But I think
It's
that's
the trend.
because myself and my colleagues who are based in Nairobi, we're really kind of running
yes,
our models.
there's an anomaly.
I'm not sure, but what that has done is it's taken it a step further to try to solve more kind of complex problems. So we've always had AI in automation, not always, but I think it was kind of Dartmouth in the late 70s is kind of when they kind of coined the term, right? And it's gone from automation to autonomy. So rather than an Excel sheet where it's kind of if-then outcome, it's much more sophisticated like a rainforest. You know, you have all of these kind of little nuances, and you have trillions, right? In GPT-4's model, you have trillions of outcomes, which is more than in the atoms in a grain of sand, right? So it's an absolute kind of hard to fathom number. For Africa, what are we excited about? I think these are great examples. We have data sovereignty. So we've invested in a business out of Egypt that has built the first multi-dialect Arabic LLM. And why does it matter? So it matters because they serve 10 plus different governments across North Africa and GCC. And what they want is they want to ensure that the data of their population for the services that they're offering, it's sovereign. They don't want it sitting in the US on some of their cloud. And this business has grown quite rapidly, incredibly capital efficient. It's a profitable business and it continues to scale. And so that's an example where we might say, look, it's hard actually to build at the model level, that foundational level on the continent. But I think that's one example, and over time we'll see that succeed. Another example, a very kind of concrete example, is a business that we invested in about 5 years ago, and we just sold the position to one of the largest publicly traded health groups in South Africa. And what this company did is they took hardware, and people would wear the hardware and would track their vitals and their health symptoms. And again, not complex kind of neural networks, but more kind of linear AI. So if the heart rate goes above a certain rate or below a certain rate, it triggers a response, et cetera, and you could kind of combine 5 or 6 different variables. And so this business was using artificial intelligence to shorten hospital bedtime from 10 days to 2 days, and then 8 days at home. And so this is an example of a business that's in the health space in Africa, where we invested and we returned capital. So there's DPI on that instance as well. And I'm just giving examples because I think what you guys said is fantastic. This is more at the operational level, and yours is more at the company level, like what you've been able to see. Another example is a company that has automated factory energy utilization. I'm not sure if you guys have come across a company called Guidewheel. Started in Kenya, relatively small business. The last round I think was about $40–50 million from kind of BlackRock and a whole bunch of other kind of huge firms, and they're now scaled across the US and Mexico. This is a small African company that wanted to optimize factories that were pen and paper using simple AI, but now has evolved to use more complex AI and has actually scaled outside of Africa to North America. And so we've seen models like that work as well. And so your question is, what are we most excited about? And so I want to push back on some of the people. We had this conversation earlier, like, how much will it change financial services? I think to a certain extent, but the reality is that we've been using like automated credit scoring, kind of fraud, all of this stuff. This has been using pretty simple AI, and the question is, how much more sophisticated can it get? So currently, you might have one model. Maybe you can contextualize it and individualize it for the, maybe what is the cost of a 100 CDs loan in Ghana at 2 p.m., at 6 p.m. on a Sunday after church, before church. You can perhaps make it much more targeted, but I do have questions about what is the kind of marginal gain or impact relative to the cost of tapping into these very big, very expensive models that we'll see on the continent. So yes, we're very excited. We're very pro-AI. We've backed companies in the space. We've exited companies in the space, and we continue to invest in the space. But we're also not just thinking that AI is going to solve all of Africa's problems, right? A lot of the data is fragmented. We still need to organize the data. We need to kind of put that data on a platform. We need the compute that Strive and others are working on, and there's still a lot of work to do.
Excellent. It is, ChatGPT and OpenAI are actually broadcasting it themselves, that the Kenyan population, 42% of the adults accessed it. So they're trying to validate it. I mean, they validated it, and they're the one broadcasting it as well. But it is interesting. I wonder why it was the month of June.
Maybe some of the colleagues, really. Dan back there uses ChatGPT for all his investment memos.
Okay. New functionality, huh? So it is interesting. You touched upon a way to get right to the controversy, right at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And we want to dive a bit deeper into that, because I do think that there is some creative tension here with the adoption of AI, government regulations of privacy of data that probably is worth exploring. But I am curious, it is, lack of resources kind of the mother of all invention, and we have low resource availability for both on the energy side and the processing side across Africa. I've seen innovative models where people are actually, rather than using the big GPUs, are using the CPUs, and actually, as you mentioned, Babacar, using this kind of fragmented way of accessing data rather than having to use the large AI LLMs that we see being built in other parts of the world. How do you see the lack of resources and the necessity to innovate kind of fueling the future of AI outside of fintech? We're going to go away from what the panel discussion is a little bit. What other interesting things are you seeing that are being driven from that lack of resources and innovation out of necessity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to go? Okay, so I'll just share an example. One thing that we've noticed in several startups we spoke with, and I'm mentioning here maybe at least two sectors. One is agric in terms of disease detection, and the other one is in languages, so local language models. Because the companies are constrained in terms of the quantity of data that they have access to, because that's another challenge we haven't mentioned, the lack of structured data. And they're also constrained in access to compute. They have been able to optimize their models to function and to be accurate on lower amounts of data, ranging from 30 to 70% more accurate to the global models or to their peers. And I think this is a competitive advantage Africa can build from. I'm not sure that alone will make us win or be best positioned in the AI race, but it is something that we need to leverage. Because one reality that we noticed is when we looked at the performance of those models, because of the abundance of GPU, compute, and data, those models are quite broad and not well focused. Actually, there's a paper that came out this week that says the future is small language models because they're much more accurate and the output that you get is more qualitative based on less data and less processing power. So I think that's one advantage that the continent may have that we should leverage in order to make these solutions more affordable. The point that Mike made, I think, is a very important point. AI is expensive. So if we just take, ChatGPT and Gemini and just start using it in the operations of our African businesses, you might find that it's actually cheaper to have people. Because we're not working from the same baseline. What is the minimum salary in Nigeria? I think it's something around $40 or $50 per month, similar in several other African countries. So at that cost, it's basically barely more than what you're paying for ChatGPT. So for certain tasks, it may not make sense at the cost at which it is, given that today, these costs are subsidized. So it's going to go up. So I think that's where there's also a second opportunity, which is to build local platforms, tooling, on the horizontal side. One example that for me is quite telling, if we think about the previous wave, which is cloud computing, cloud-enabled computing, what we see in Africa now is that these global players are too expensive. Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud have been distributing their solutions, giving free credits to startups, and then one day the startup wakes up and they realize they're paying $30 million in cloud this year. Okay, that's a lot, even if you're a big startup. And so as a result, players like Zoho from India have leveraged that competitive advantage that they have, which is to be cheaper, but also to do local servicing, paying in local currency, having local customer servicing, et cetera, because they actually care about this market. It's a bigger share of their global market, comparatively to a Google where you pay in dollars and, although it has changed a bit, but you pay in dollars and you're not going to have anybody to talk to when you have a problem. It is not adequate in context where you have irregular access to energy, irregular access to connectivity. So that's an opportunity on which we can also build local tooling that is maybe cheaper and more adequate.
Excellent. Caroline, you?
Yeah, I wanted to just to, on your point, like how will AI really change that? Is that going to be revolutionary somehow? Just some numbers. So there is a $5.7 trillion gap annually for SME financing globally, so in emerging markets, which is huge. And currently the banks are not targeting these SMEs, right?
Too expensive, right?
It is too expensive, exactly. You don't have enough data. So what's been done in the past now? So first you had this wave of microfinance. Then microfinance, you had these fintechs that were using data in order to do these nano loans, basically, $50, $100, $500 and things like this based on, it could be SMS data, it could be mobile money data or these kind of things, or transactional data. But for this layer above, which is a bit more complex to underwrite, right? So we're talking about SME, even making maybe 100K, 200K a year or something like that, you need to take into consideration other kind of elements. And for that, what they do is you need to go send an agent on the ground, Is there a business around here? Yes, that's correct. How much do you do? Can I check, etc. That's how it currently works, right? In the end, some might be some underwriting, but they're not. I think there were some interesting examples of people that tried to do that, and some banks that are very, very excited about the opportunity. We're just trying to do a partnership now with one of the largest banks in Ethiopia, for example. Now they're making 25% of their revenues based on these nano loans, and they realize it's magic. I don't have any branch, and I can just pour the money there, and I get the return with relatively no NPL after some time, because you need to train the model. What if I could do that to the other segment that's completely untargeted? And why that segment matters so much is that it's the largest employer, basically, in all these markets, and the biggest contribution to the GDP as well. It is untapped currently. So that's where, for me, that makes a big difference. Because now, if I link it to your points, anyone could use AI because it's conversational. So, for example, on the WhatsApp app that we have, we're targeting even rural areas, people speaking in their local language, voice. So we do speech to text, text to speech, for example, in local language. It's very easy to collect data suddenly. So now you start collecting all of this contextual data, which you can use, feed the AI models in order to do some credit assessments, which was not possible before. And for me, that unlocks a huge opportunity to target all this huge layer here in the middle that's currently not addressed. And again, the banks are very, very excited about that.
Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we wouldn't be up here if we didn't believe that, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge opportunity. I mean, in that contextual data, so using voice to share data, it means perhaps there's a new group of people who were illiterate and couldn't write to fill out a form, so that's being accessed. But what data, based on what you've seen, is additional, actually, in terms of this kind of context? Is it tone? Is it pitch? Is it something else that's feeding into a new way to do credit decisioning that perhaps didn't exist previously?
Not necessarily. Just talking about accounting, for example. Like most of these small businesses, they lack basic skills to have a proper accounting system or something. So with this conversational approach, you can simply ask things like, okay, how much did you make today? How many items did you sell? And you can start, starting reconstructing slowly the P&L and then the cash flow, the balance sheet, and all these kind of things. And suddenly you start having, now that's what they see, right? On the other side, on the underwriter side, suddenly they start having a P&L and a balance sheet and proper financials in front of them when they can take decisions now. And you just the way you collected the data.
So it's the way that the data is.
They would never be onboarded on QuickBooks and these kind of things, for example. It's too complicated, etc. But if you do it that way, and of course, then you need to verify the data. We do that, for example, by cross-checking, sometimes asking the same question in different forms, etc. to cross-check the information. You can have API integration to cross-check with their bank accounts and these kind of things. So there are different ways then to validate that. But that's the kind of information I'm talking about, for example, that we can leverage.
Fantastic.
Mike, do you have to weigh in on that, or?
No, I think it's important that we all can understand what the innovations are to better invest and to better kind of back businesses. So, for example, we've invested in quite a few businesses with balance sheets that are lending, and one quite unique data point. This is kind of pre-generative AI that arose was the likelihood to repay based on proximity to a church.
Yeah.
Right? And this is something that
The
existed
geolocation,
before.
if you go to church on Sunday, also plays a role in that.
Yeah, right. I mean, there are lots of things. Do you have a gambling app on your phone or not? Do you have an email app? Does that mean you have a job? So there's a lot of data that exists. And I think the innovation here that you're talking about is how do you turn someone who is perhaps kind of illiterate into a bankable customer.
Correct.
And that's a huge innovation. And then the question that I have is like beyond that, how do you contextualize it? So that way that person will have the exact right price and will have the exact kind of right risk profile. For me, the jump is actually going to be about getting the right price for every single individual, any time of day, any day of the week, any kind of scale. If it's a $100 business, a $1,000 business, a $100,000 business. I think that's probably where the kind of marginal gains will come when it comes to kind of real kind of decisioning on the credit side.
Very interesting. So before we open it up, because I'm sure that there'll be questions, let's talk about, other than the brief challenges we talked about in terms of energy and power, what other challenges do you see in the market? Are you seeing regulatory challenges? Are you seeing challenges from your LP and wanting to data protection? Or is there a whole nother set of challenges that we haven't even considered or discussed? So let's start your end, Mike. What do you say?
Challenges.
Challenges.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
So I think cost is a big one, and we've discussed that. I think you'll have some comments as well on kind of regulation. And we all know that regulation kills innovation, kind of in pretty developed markets. However, I think in a lot of our markets, we want to encourage regulation to know that we can innovate and then invest in businesses that won't get shut down because they've been moving too quickly or innovating too quickly. I do think one of the biggest things that keeps me up at night when I think about where AI is going and where the continent is what is the gap between kind of how quickly the market is moving and whether or not this is going to be something that widens the gap, or is this an opportunity for us to narrow the gap? And I think at the core of that is data, because there's so much data that exists. But even in the kind of last phase of digital world, as you said, kind of cloud, that data hasn't been properly organized, properly labeled. I think if I think about examples of kind of data Turks, right, the Sama sources and others, cloud factories, there's a bit of a business and an industry where people were outsourcing the data labeling. But again, we were labeling other people's data in Kenya, right? Like some of the biggest businesses in that space were labeling data for Facebook and others. And so it's like, are we going to be serving like the developed world and their models, or are we actually going to build and own? Is there going to be data sovereignty, right? And I think that's, it's a challenge. I wish I were here proposing solutions, but I think that's why we spend time speaking with a lot of entrepreneurs who are building, right, in these sectors and backing the ones who have great models and ideas.
Caroline?
Yeah. So from a regulatory standpoint, it's true that it's not that easy. Can give some examples. So, for example, in Rwanda, they basically prevent you to, they make it much more difficult to export the data outside of the country, which is a bit complicated, right? When you want to work with, for the lack of, so we don't have any other alternatives for the moment than using the large LLMs out there. So we need to process these data somehow outside of these countries. So these kind of regulatory challenges, I would say, are pretty, so you need to think outside of the box in order to figure out solutions, I would say. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I understand where it's coming from. And on your point on regulation is killing innovation, I don't know if it's killing, but at least it's making it a bit more complicated. So that's just an example. Then, of course, we work with large DFIs, foundations that are putting a lot of pressure for us to be, and again, I think I very much agree with them, to be very careful about the data that we're collecting, why we're collecting them, how we're using them, to whom we're able to share these data. And on that note, we can control just some part of it, because when we're sending these data to the different LLMs we work with, could be Google, could be OpenAI or some others, yes, they say in their terms and conditions that they won't necessarily train their model with it. We don't know if that's the case or not. Yeah. So anyway, these are some challenges that we face. So far, we found some solutions around it. But if it becomes some countries, for example, or DFIs were asking us to host the data locally, which also complicates a bit the work because you need to replicate different things. So these challenges, I think, are inherent to this model. Again, not necessarily bad, but it's true that it slows the process for us, for sure.
Abakar?
Yes. I think every challenge is a business opportunity, right? Because business is about finding solutions for somebody's problem. So for me, the biggest opportunity today really is about driving AI awareness. because as much as we're talking about AI here, when you go in corporates, businesses that are non-tech, most of them are not using AI. They're not integrating AI in their operations. They're not thinking about what does this mean for my business. And I think that's where we need to be much more engaged as a continent, because it's not just about AGI. That's the US play. We're not trying to reach AGI in Africa. However, given our digital native workforce and the youth of the population, we could lead in AI adoption. Actually, we actually lead in AI adoption, and we can lead in AI adoption in businesses. And I think there's a huge opportunity there, not just for tech startups, but also for all the players in the digital transformation space that can support that integration of AI in government services, in businesses, in SMEs, etc. So that's, I think, is the biggest challenge, because if you don't have that, local players, local ecosystem will not scale. And that's a game we can win at. Yeah. So I'll end on that.
Excellent. Well, that's a good note to end on. Let's go at, yes, do we have the microphone? Oh yes, the microphone's right there.
Thank you. Let me make my question simple. My name is Reginald from Tanzania. Is AI going to make humanity intellectually lazy?
Humanity?
Intellectually lazy.
Yes, yeah. Or is it going to augment it? Gentlemen. Mike, you
First thing, you have to, let's put this into context, right? So we're all here investing in relatively subscale funds globally, more focused on Africa. So we're not the authorities. We don't have the answer. Babacar might, actually.
No.
But there is data that it has been shown, and this is over the past, I think, 6 weeks it's come out, that in terms of the depth of understanding, I think the retention of data, and again, I read this on ChatGPT, so I forgot the third point. The kind of knowledge, when people are kind of generating and not kind of going through searching, finding, thinking, it's less effective, right? So I think there's a big challenge and a big risk there, but that doesn't have to be the outcome, right? People can either use it to come up with answers, or people can use a lot of the Gen AI, like that chat interface, to help support kind of thinking, process development. And so I think we have to be careful about how it is used and how it is used in schools, within government, across the continent. But it's more of an opportunity, I think, than a threat.
Yeah, maybe on that, I think there were some studies in the past also that showed similar effects that you're talking about when computers came out in general, or even just calculating, basically. People were becoming less good at that, right? Or remembering things, because suddenly you have the internet, so why remember anything? And what happened is that you developed other cognitive skills afterwards. In that case, it could be creativity, it could be problem solving. We've been running some programs on our capacity building side of activities. We are running programs to train people and on the 21st century skills. So you want to wonder, what are these skills, right? And everything leads in the direction of soft skills, basically. How is it to collaborate together on a project? How do you solve problems together? How do you have empathy when collaborating with others? All these kind of skills that are the skills of the future. So I don't know if, on your point of laziness, I think it will be very different skills that we'll need for kids, especially in the future, rather than the hard skills that we currently have developed, because they will certainly indeed be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
So we have 3 minutes left, and we have 3 of you, so 1 minute each. Final thoughts. Anyone ready to jump ahead?
Mike, you want to go?
Fine. Final thought. So I think the African continent has often been seen as one that is fraught with risk, that is impossible to navigate, and there aren't real opportunities. And in some instances, that's true. But generally, and I think all of us here know and understand that risk in Africa is misunderstood and therefore it's mispriced. Therefore, there's a huge opportunity for a lot of investors and people building businesses to actually take advantage of that kind of arbitrage and misunderstanding of risk on the African continent. And I believe that AI is no different. That people will think about AI and they will skip thinking about Africa. And that's where a lot of the opportunities will arise. It will be about being very smart, being very precise, and being very long-term about how to kind of apply AI either within businesses that are existing or to build AI native solutions that either businesses or consumers use to really advance development, productivity, output across the continent. So we're very bullish on AI. I think more and more of our investments, current existing portfolio and new investments are going to be either AI adjacent or AI native. And yeah, we think it's absolutely a wave that is here to stay and will help create a new baseline for productivity and output on the continent.
Excellent. Abakar,
That's very
30 seconds.
So I think as much as there's doubt about AI, there's talks of the AI bubble, etc., we're all in on AI. And that's because there are some fundamentals that we think will not change over time. AI is a tool. AI is not, human, it's not a person. It's a tool that is very powerful that until today is still programmed and controlled by humans, even if AI has some, auto improvement, capacities. What really evolves and captures the value is data and context. Okay, and those things as of today are not mastered by AI in the African context and most of the time. So what AI is doing is making data and those who generate and own that data much more valuable if they leverage it well. That's the first thing. That will not change. So long as you have your data, you can actually build valuable AI solutions on top. Context is about the servicing. That's also something that up till now, even with all the advances that we had, and Mike mentioned earlier, there was AI 10, 20, 30 years ago used in different ways. Despite that, what we see is that in most spaces in the digital space in Africa, the solutions are local. Because they require that context, they require that customization. Africa is big, it is complex. You cannot just come and paste one solution on top of everything. That will not cover the whole market. And that makes it that all this fragmentation is actually a lot of small markets that OpenAI or Amazon don't care about because it's too small for them to be relevant. That's an opportunity for us. And that's where we can build a thriving ecosystem. But I mean, each of you is working in very different spaces. What we need is collaboration. An ecosystem doesn't get built by one player or two players.
So, quick 5 seconds.
Thank you for your 30 seconds. Yeah.
I'm very optimistic about AI for the continent. When mobile came out in Africa, they were the one. Africa was leading the way in launching mobile money and became #1 in that field. I think in finding solutions to local problems. And I think here that could be the same, where AI can be definitely leveraged by local entrepreneurs to basically address all the issues that we have on the continent. Yeah. So very optimistic about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for listening. Should we get a quick photo of our...
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
How about a round of applause?